The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, or perhaps good morning, everyone. This is Alan Schimmel, Editor-in-Chief of DevOps.com, and thanks for joining us on another great DevOps.com webinar. Today's webinar is on a topic that's kind of near and dear to me, and it's DevSecOps related. It is sponsored by our good friends at Evident.io. And the topic is, hopefully you can see on your screens, excuse me, is security as code, how to adopt a cloud native DevOps model without sacrificing security. Now, I will tell you that here at DevOps.com, this whole topic around DevSecOps, rugged DevOps, SecOps, whatever you want to call it, is one of the most hotly debated and in-demand topics that we are discussing around the whole DevOps movement. Before we get started, though, I want to just take a quick moment. Most of you, or many of you, may have joined us in the past on webinars, but just to refresh and let newcomers know, we have set aside time for questions. And, you know, the mark of a good webinar is how many questions we get from our audience. We hope we have some great speakers today. We hope we'll have a lot of questions. If you look into your GoToWebinar control panel, for most of you, will be on the right-hand side of your screen, and go down, you'll see a section marked questions, and you'll see a little caret or arrow. If you expand that, you can see that you could you can type your question in there. We strongly encourage you to type your question in real time. First of all, you don't have to worry about forgetting it, because by the time we get to questions, you may forget what your question was. Number two, it's queued. So if we do get a lot of questions, your question will be answered in, most of them are done in chronological order. So, you get it in early and you get a better shot at it. And number three is, if we do get so many questions that we can't answer them all, we have a record of them here in the question queue, and we will ask our panelists to get you written answers if possible. So, because we do value the questions and we want to make sure you get answers to them. So again, please use the question section of the control panel and type your questions in real time as you're thinking of these things. Secondly, I want to just quickly point you down to the chat section, which for most of you will be on the bottom of your GoToWebinar control panel. Here at DevOps.com webinars, we use the chat section if you're having a technical issue. Maybe your slides aren't advancing, or my audio or someone's audio is choppy. Please type it in there. We do have webinar engineers standing by who will try to solve your problem, or at least if you make us aware of it, we can find out what the issue is, and we will try to help you. So chats go in there, questions go in questions. And I think that's all you really are going to need to know here from me. And let's start jumping into our webinar. So as I said, it is sponsored by Evident.io. It's security as code, how to adopt a cloud native DevOps model without sacrificing security. And if we could go to our next slide. Let me introduce you to our panelists today. Panelists today. We're lucky to have two people joining us. First of all, let me introduce you to John Hutchinson, who's a solution engineer at Evident.io. And you can see him, he's the dapper guy in the Blues Brother outfit without the glasses on your screen. Hutch, welcome, and thanks for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
I was just to check to make sure you come off of mute. And then joining Hutch is one of the stars of our show, Anthony Johnson, who's actually a staff engineer at Ellie Mae, and he's going to talk to you about Ellie Mae a bit. Anthony has spoken at numerous events, including Amazon's reInvent, and he's going to give us a real hands-on, dirt under the fingernails practitioner view of things today. So Anthony, welcome to our webinar.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. All right, let's go to our next slide now then, folks. So just let me, before I hand things over, let me quickly go over our agenda today. We're going to talk a little bit about automation compliance policies. We're going to get into fine-grained controls, configuration management techniques, and then how do we manage compliance at scale? And that's always a big topic. So I think we have a great panel who can answer all these things. And with that being said, I'm going to hand it over here now to Anthony, I believe, correct?
That is correct.
Okay, Anthony, take it away.
Awesome. So appreciate, Alan, the introduction. Numerous speaking engagements might be a little too much to give me, but I am doing my best to give back. So so speaking of security as code and how we move things forward, Ellie Mae is being a fintech company is definitely trying to do as many things automated to really take the humans out of sort of our security, because it's ultimately the humans seem to be the ones that mess things up. So quick introduction, a little bit more introduction on myself. That smug fella there is myself. The smug photo is actually a bit of a joke, and so of course I have to use it everywhere now. Myself, the photo is actually part of my, I call this kind of the new way of working, where kind of sort of operations as a service. And so part of that is not just them versus us. It's also thinking, partnering with them as a way to move forward. So as the photo actually came, I role played the smug CEO in an AWS game day. For those who aren't familiar, a game day is a simulation of DevOps that AWS does, usually at their tech summits and their reInvent. And so since we did it, we actually did one of these on site, which if you have a AWS account rep, they can actually make that happen if you have critical mass. But the fun thing is you bring AWS on site, and and you basically we had 150 engineers all go through this DevOps simulation that AWS does, and it was very enlightening. So as far as myself, staff engineer over the cloud platform at Ellie Mae, that's basically a hands-on architect role in the which most people would consider a legacy operations. I've only been at Ellie Mae for a year. It's part of their transition to the cloud. And personally about me, I love to bake natural sourdough yeast bread. I married a Japanese woman, so now I visit Japan every year. And like most people should, I want to live on Mars. So hoping Elon Musk makes it happen, and rockets are cool. So a bit about Ellie Mae. So Ellie Mae is not a government company or government entity. You're probably thinking of Fannie Mae, which is one. We're actually played off of the name, and Ellie is kind of electronic. They're very clever, but it's an older company, established in 1997. It's a Bay Area company. I think we're last 2 or 3 years we've been a best of the Bay place to work. And quite a bit of the mortgage transactions come through our back end. Our customers are mortgage brokers and banks, and so right now it's 25 to 30% come through our back end. So that's kind of a bit of the companies where we're at. We are a fintech company in the East Bay. Moving on, I think it's fun before we start going here, because a lot of people they come into companies, and a lot of it's all about transformation now. Everybody wants to transform into the cloud. Everybody wants to transform into hybrid architectures, or automation. And so I like this idea of talking about the Ellie Mae that I've come to know. And so this is what I know after a year. And so Ellie Mae itself started as a thick client company, sending out CDs to companies, running data behind the company's firewalls. And this was basically what they did to close mortgages. And then the next kind of iteration, this is more recently, this is about transformations, and companies become they want to transform. And so somebody really smart at Ellie Mae said, you know what, all that data is valuable, and it really is a pain in the butt trying to maintain all of this infrastructure, trying to maintain all of these databases that are running behind firewalls at customers' locations. And we have thousands of customers, so you can imagine the complexity of the problem as you go. So somebody said, you know what, let's bring as much of that in-house as we can to help our customers, deliver and deliver in a more stable fashion. There we go. And then the next one, which is what I consider me coming in, is our hybrid cloud era, and I call that the era, because we're finally getting to where we should be, or where the modern kind of thing. And so hybrid for us is not AWS or Azure. It's basically it's us admitting and being real to ourselves that we have quite a large investment in our private cloud. And those take 3 years of depreciation, and there's also risk to flipping the switch. And so it's the acknowledgement that we're going to be running in a hybrid way for at least some time, and then that also may transition to a dual cloud, public cloud strategy in the future. Who knows what the future holds, which is also very important. The whole point of the slide is really the past doesn't really matter, and it shouldn't hold you back. So in my job, I actually don't care about all these things, because the only current state that matters is the state of today and designing a solution to solve the problems of today. But I do think it's fun to think about legacy companies. I've worked at a company that's been around since the 60s. In the 60s, ways of thinking should not hold you back from thinking outside the box or pushing people past their sort of conservative boundaries that they have. So a little bit of, because I think some people maybe also be dealing with the same problem that a lot of companies have, which is why should I go to the public cloud? So I thought it was important to tell people it's a bit of why Ellie Mae went to the cloud, and I completely agree with these. We had our private cloud data center. Ellie Mae is not an expert in running data centers, whereas somebody like Google and Amazon and Microsoft are. So stability of our internal offering, the ability to scale, because obviously anytime we want to scale, there's a huge purchase that goes in there, and it hits us in our pocketbook quite dearly, and usually in the measure of millions of dollars. And then, of course, agility of the internal offering, where if all of a sudden a product goes away or a new product comes on, then being able to pivot our infrastructure to be what we want is often very hard in a sort of a private data center. So public cloud made a lot of sense. It's to see how the transition didn't work really well, but that little cost spun in a cool way. But basically, cost is really, really small on a purpose, because if you're going to the cloud expecting huge amounts of cost savings, I think that should be the least concern with that. Cost, while you may save money, it may cost you a little bit more, but ultimately, my experience has found it's a bit of a wash, and there should be other drivers that are really pushing you towards the cloud, and those should be, these agility, scaling, and stability. But cost is, you definitely can save a lot of money on the cloud if you re-engineer, but of course, that takes a lot of effort in potentially engineering efforts, and if you're re-engineering your entire product, there's opportunity cost, of course, with features in the marketplace. So you have to be careful with your drivers to make sure you're not signing yourself up for a huge redesign to save $50. So before we get to I have kind of a neat little demo and some interesting ways to look. I wanted to talk about the pillars that our strategy has. And so I have a very stereotypical pillar on the right, because what other thing can you use? But the idea is we adopted the you build it, you run it methodology, which Amazon and now it seems like the industry is really putting forward, which is really the idea of microservices and pushing, horizontally scaling the business by pushing responsibilities out into almost small startups. And I'll dive into each of these in just a second. And least privilege, this kind of gets into a sort of a SecOps, DevSecOps kind of mode. Trust but verify, automation and self-healing, and then the last one I really want to touch on at the very end, which is customer-focused open door, which I think is an often missed problem that companies run into. So moving in, you build it, you run it, and while I don't think anybody's ever said it before except for me, I added on the idea that you pay for it, and mainly because if the people have all this ability to build it and run it, but then they don't have any sort of, if they're not holding the pocketbook in some sort of way, meaning the business unit, then you end up with extremely expensive solutions that could have been designed in a much more economical way. But what does you build it, you mean it run? What does you build it, you run it mean? It really means that that an engineering team is going to build the solution, and when it build the entire solution, you run it. The same engineering team runs it. So this means the traditional centralized sort of like a centralized DevOps team that is going to do all of the development of in AWS world, the CloudFormation code or the Terraform code or the API orchestration code, or just the guy that's going to go rack and stack something in the data center. that's gone. And of course, the engineering team's not going to go rack and stack something in your data centers, but really pushes forward this progression into automation and moving forward. But you run it basically means that we are giving as much responsibility to the engineering team as we possibly can, so that we are not a centralized constraint that drags them down. And then my favorite, you pay for it, which I will admit Ellie Mae is not there yet. I've only had a year. But it's the goal that costs should be as transparent as possible to everybody who's building a service. And if you have internal services, the ability for them to be able to charge internal customers sort of a dollar amount so that they can keep everybody honest throughout the entire stack. Because as soon as you break monolithic applications down into all these little small pieces, somebody may charge $1.50 for something. But if the team it depends on, it costs them $8 for that transaction, then the company's lost. So really being able to visualize things throughout the entire stack, for me, is it's a goal that I really want to get the company to. And if you make lots of money, maybe this last bullet is not that important. But most of us are trying to be very competitive in a market and really trying to drive things. So I think it's definitely the least concern on here, but it's definitely a very one that we should be thinking about. So least privilege. Ellie Mae is a fintech company, so separation of duties is extremely important for us, and so we pretty much have we follow an AWS sort of best practice of isolation, and the ultimate isolation for AWS is AWS accounts. So we pretty much put development QA in anything that is that we want. We put basically the places where the innovation is happening and where we want people to fail and where we want them to find their problems. We put those into a separate AWS account, and that's where the developers ultimately live. The developers in these accounts get full access. We don't want to kill innovation. Full access doesn't mean we give them everything. We of course are very reasonable with. If there's a service that they're never ever going to have to use, there's no way I can justify it, then I will disable it. But the point is they get a rather liberal access in this account. And the point is this account is a sandbox for the most part. It's the lab, and it's where I want my teams to fail. I don't want the first time the internet sees this code is to be in the prod account on release day, because if they left some sort of SQL injection or something that's going to in the code, I'd rather be found in the dev. I'd rather the dev account be hacked, months before the prod we even see the problem in the prod. So, and then how does the developers get the code there? It's with a fully realized CI/CD system, and for our CI/CD system, the developers write the code that pushes into we're using Artifactory internally, and there's Nexus. The Nexus product is also a really good one, but basically. We use a normal stack you'd imagine. Jenkins, we build it, we deploy to our factory, and then we have CD process, which we have a couple options today that we're working on. But the point is that the CI/CD stack has access to deploy, but nothing else. So it's a neat little thing to look at. So moving on, I'd just like to point out that least privilege is not just about the AWS account. It's not just the infrastructure. It also dives into the application as well. So we like to give the developers access to create all of their CloudFormation or Terraform, and it's largely because we want them to think about how all these things come together. Security groups need to be least privilege. Component A talks to component B. Component B can talk to component C, but not component A. And the reason is that we're controlling our blast radius. Least privilege is all about blast radius. And when something goes wrong with application A, I don't want it to have to roll over and affect application B, and I definitely don't want it to come to a security problem in application B. So we go down the list. So we go down and we say everybody must be least privileged. No opening up access to to 000/0s. On the internet, that definitely we can constrain things much better. So we really kind of drive for this least privilege, and it affects the way we design things on the back end. Where yes, I can have a single guy own all the keys, but should he? Is always the question. What is the reason he would have that? So everything else, CI/CD, everything is code, means that everything is, you can create a diff on everything. You can look at everything that's going to be going into the environment, and I don't mind humans being involved reviewing things and saying that looks normal. But the point is that as soon as we transition to everything as code, we should have a checkpoint at which we can say, look at state A and look at state B and tell me what the difference is going to be. For ourselves, we do have tight constraints on our network connectivity, making sure that that is secure. So for us, everything goes through a VPC to VPC like type firewall. This is probably very familiar to people, but network segmentation is very important. So with everything being its own AWS account, we get very, very small network segments, and those go through basically a normal firewall. And the goal is to eventually automate all of that so that the application in code can declare its dependency, and then software-defined networking will go off to the firewall and automatically plumb that rule. And so we get into sort of separation of concerns there where, right now, it's no fun having to go and push through a network team a firewall request. I don't think that's fun in any company I've ever worked at. So again, as soon as you sort of materialize these kind of needs in different places, you can start to set about automating them and pick them off as little things. And then production accounts, I already mentioned. So our AWS production accounts, only our internal public cloud team has access to them to do anything mutable. So we do give the developers read-only access because things do go wrong, and obviously they need ways to go and look at the state of what happened. But the whole point is our public cloud team accessing that account should not be business as usual. It should be an exception. And really most teams have some sort of a security team. My expectation is that the security team should be notified anytime somebody is logging into one of these accounts. And it's like a policeman firing a bullet from a gun. There's a lot of paperwork. So really, I want our public cloud team to have that check and balance. When they log into a public account, it's like firing a bullet. Now they've got to go, do paperwork, and obviously, if go fill out a ticket essentially. But if they're having to do that over and over again, then it really pushes forward kind of the line of saying to the development teams, you need to automate this piece. Why am I doing this? We want to break that sort of dependency on a centralized sort of DevOps team. So automation and self-healing. This is kind of getting into the sort of the funner part of the webinar. And so one of the most important things is if you talk about AWS accounts, and some people work in big shops. Ellie Mae is probably a mid-sized shop, but I worked at a rather large AWS customer, and monthly bill measured in the millions of dollars, and the AWS accounts were in 250 plus, 300, and everybody would always say, well, that's a lot of AWS accounts. You must be crazy. But the thing is that if you have a proper strategy in place, if you have the way to go, the team that maintained those 300 accounts centrally was 2 people at the time. And that's even actually the guy who and it wasn't me that maintained it at the time, it was another guy on the team, but he was able to hold down the fort of all security problems, whitelisting, keeping every account in spec, and maintaining shared artifacts that everybody in the account could use, really all by himself. And so as long as I don't really care what your strategy is for maintaining your accounts, but it definitely cannot be point and click, and it definitely can't be something that you're going to, just sort of organically arrive at it. So you really have to devise a strategy up early. And so there's a lot of good tools out there. Starting on the right, Cloud Custodian is a Capital One open source product. They were actually at reInvent last year, and it's a YAML-based kind of configuration where you use a kind of a model underneath, and it's a decent product that I've seen people use. Of course, with all open source projects, there's always more work to be done on them. So, always be aware of what you're biting off. The little monkey guy, of course, is Simian Army. One of the Simian, Netflix has a lot of their account management tools, Chaos Monkey, and all of these things, and those are all fantastic tools. For Ellie Mae, we chose the next 2 bullets as a combination of using Evan&IO and Lambda for us to do it. One of the one of the things that I will advise is a lot of teams naturally gravitate to use something like CloudFormation, or if you're using OpenStack, you have Heat, or even using HashiCorp's Terraform, which are all declarative. They're all declarative infrastructure. So declarative infrastructure means you're opening up a JSON file, you're creating an object that represents the artifact you want in Amazon or Azure or somewhere else. So you're saying, I want an EC2 instance, and it should be this type of EC2 instance with this much memory and this code installed on it. And CloudFormation is really good for orchestrating the lifecycle of a product. It's not really good for orchestrating a security artifact, because the problem is when the security artifact changes, you need something that's going to detect that security artifact changed, and that's not really a feature of CloudFormation. CloudFormation will actually refuse to update to update the resource if it thinks that something's changed. So it's actually the opposite. CloudFormation wants deterministic stateful deployments, whereas we're really looking for artifacts changed, and those are the anomalies. So I would say keeping away from CloudFormation is probably a good idea for these type of things. So trust but verify is, of course, I'm not sure if I hit the trust, but I'm sure I hit the trust but verify. But trust but verify is basically I give more access than I probably should, but at the same time I am verifying. That kind of sounds weird when you say, well, least privilege, but it means I'm giving them the access they need where they need it. But I'm also verifying that they're not doing something wrong. And so this protects me, this protects them, and this also protects the company. And so the way that we've done this is with a combination. Of course, we're on Amazon using Evident.io, and then using Lambda as a call out from Evident.io to go and remediate code in our AWS accounts. So with that, I'll step into the demo. This may take just a second to get going, but and so when this pops up, we should be seeing the Evident.io screen. And no pressure on the Evident.io screen. There we go. So waiting on that mouse to move before I start talking on a slide here. So let's see. So give us just a second, guys. Looks like we're having a little technical difficulty here. You can never practice enough. There we go. There we go. So mouse should start moving. So good. So getting right on with it. So this is sort of a reporting screen of Evident.io. I'll go to a dashboard. We're using a Hackathon account for this one. Obviously, that's not a very vital account. But generally, this is teams on the left, alerts they have, and then breaking them out by risk. So Evident.io itself will actually do sort of CIS polling of your account to make sure it's within spec, and generates accounts. I was doing a lot of demo and a lot of different accounts, but they make nice little reports. And this is really the tool. So signatures, we have a page here where there's a lot of different signatures that I don't really care about in this account, and then we have alerts that are there. So alerts, this is the Hackathon account. I don't really care much about KMS or Knackles, but for the demo purpose, it's good to show these alerts that are there. And so, it's nice to have here, but one of the nice things, we'll have the CIS signatures, and then they have custom signatures, which allow you to inject your own code using Ruby or Node.js. And then, of course, the nice thing is Evident.io provides me with a really, really nice UI. They provide me with a scheduling engine. They allow me to basically write orchestration. And of course, we have, we haven't hit 100 AWS accounts today, but they handle that ability to run these custom code against all of my accounts. And so, of course, we have the path. It looks like we froze again. Oh, there we go. So anyway, so we have the passes, and if anything fails, then we'll see a failure. And basically, what Evident.io has the ability to do is to kick off some sort of automation, and and I can write these rules in any number of ways. So so the nice thing is, and so I also have the AWS account up. And so this is our Hackathon account. If you've never seen an AWS dashboard, here it is. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pretend that I am one of my customers, basically. So we have, people have unfederated access, and they can do really dumb things. They can go in here and they can delete their VPC. And so, so we actually chose to create VPCs for our customers. And so, and this is getting into sort of global optimization and things like that, where, if you've ever done networking inside of AWS, you will know that VPC networking can get quite hairy. So we chose this as one of our automation targets. And we chose this early, and it solves a lot of problems for us as a centralized team. So as a public cloud team, any confusion that I leave with the developers, they happen. And it didn't delete right away because NAT gateways take a little bit more time to delete. And but while we're waiting on that to delete, we'll jump over and we'll mess some other things up. And so we do some simple automations. So the user sign-in link for users, we normalize all of those. And so somebody 20 people may be in one AWS account. If somebody goes in there and breaks the customized link because we give them access to, we want them to have access to IAM, then of course that could be disruptive. And the Hackathon team has a whole bunch of accounts for hackathons, but there is an admin group, and rather than deleting it, I'll actually go and say, what, I'd make this one not be administrator anymore. And so some of this is limitation of it's really hard to spend all of your time writing custom IAM policies to try to get least privilege in AWS. You could spend your entire time and still not achieve it. So the point is that, black and white, unfettered access in this one with some constraints, and then in production is obviously a lot more stable. And so we'll go back to VPC. Those NAT gateways should have had time to delete themselves. And as we roll into it, it will delete because I've recorded the video. So we'll let it delete itself. And so now we're pretty much going to be in a bad state. We have 3 alarms, or three things that are wrong with this account, and that's not good. And the delete, when I recorded it, the delete seemed to go faster. So give it just a second to delete here. And then my goal is to remediate it oh, it's fine. There it goes. So then what we will do is we will go to the Evident platform, and we will run a custom report here. And so this will automatically run on a scheduled interval, but since this is a demo and I recorded a video, I didn't have the patience. You guys didn't want to wait, up to an hour, which is what the schedule is for this account. So there we go. So we will run just for this account, and then we will record the queue, and and so that basically kicks off a report on the back end, and we can go ahead and start. We'll do a refresh on that guy. While we're waiting, so the report's already been kicked off. So we still don't actually have, we still don't, and it's fixed. So the nice thing about this is the amount of rules that I'm running against this account is, right now it's in the normal, we're probably running about 50 of my rules, and Evident has hundreds, if not thousands of rules that they run. I'm not sure the exact number. But then we can see our VPC is back. And the VPC is not just creating a VPC and forgetting about it. We're actually doing things like creating public and private subnets for them, and creating custom route tables as well. setting up sort of a highly available route table that they can go with. So all of this code is written inside of, we use Lambda today to write it. For us, it was a combination of using something like Cloud Custodian, which we would have to go and extend Cloud Custodian, and that gets us into pull requests. And while I love open source, it really comes into how much work am I going to have to do to get my full coverage that I need, and is it easier for me to go write that piece of code? And so Boto 3, we're using Python. Boto 3 itself is a fantastic library, and it's actually really easy with their resources and their services to really just do very simple checks and then remediate it. And the other problem that we ran into is these types of remediations can do no harm, meaning that when I found that administrative group that was missing the administrative policy, I can't just delete it and then recreate it, because it also has state information involved in it, which is what which policies are attached to it. I mean, which users are attached to that group. So if I delete it, that artifact's gone, and recreate it, now there needs to be some other automation that knows who is supposed to be in that group or something like that. So it can be, it can be a little bit more tedious to have to go down the route of repairing something rather than delete it, scorched earth, delete it, and then recreate it. But it is a very important thing when you're approaching these sort of shared artifacts that teams use. So with that, we'll hop back over to the presentation. And so, real quick, I mentioned Evan and IO, and since Hutch is here on the webinar with us, I thought it was a good opportunity to let them speak a little bit more to their product, because I probably didn't do it justice. So with that, Hutch, I will hand it over to you to talk a little bit about Evan and IO.
Thanks, Anthony. Yeah, once again, this is Hutch here. Anthony showed a great kind of overview of a little bit about our platform and what it looks like in the dashboard and so forth, but also how you can actually take advantage of that by auto remediating vulnerabilities or alerts that are generated from ESP itself. So in the interest of the title of this webinar, Security as Code, you can do a lot of those things in the dashboard, but underneath, in my opinion, what's most powerful is the ability to take those alerts that are generated from ESP and do exactly what Anthony did. Find a pipeline for remediation that works in the confines of your business objectives or what you're aiming to do. And we provide a lot of resources in that area. So we have the dashboard. Of course, you can go in there and manage the alerts and reports that way. But we can also do that programmatically through SDKs that are available. So we have a Ruby SDK and a Python SDK for those of you who use those languages. Coupled with that, we also have custom signatures. So there are a ton of checks that are built into ESP that you can take advantage of and turn on right off the bat. But there's also the ability to write your own custom checks. So look for security controls that are relevant to your your business interests there, or what you're looking for your security framework. So you can write those custom signatures in Ruby or JavaScript, and those can be done within the platform itself as well, that dashboard that Anthony showed. And those go along right with in your reports. So the same way you saw them side by side, we have signatures, the custom signatures. And those custom signatures generate alerts that can be pipelined out just like the default signatures into integrations. So Anthony mentioned they use ESP to pipeline those out to a Lambda function, which is a great way to do it, especially as far as auto remediation. And we have some integrations here that are listed in the slide. You can see Amazon SNS. We have some others as well. Slack, Splunk, Sumo Logic, Jira, webhooks. A few things you can do there, for example, is you could even take those alerts that are generated, pipeline them out to Amazon SNS, and take them from there to do what you want with them. You could pipeline that to Lambda itself from there as well, and trigger an auto remediation function and go from there. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it, and no one size fits all approach works, but we have a lot of different resources for figuring out what works best for you. So, again, from the SDKs where we have programmatic access to ESP, in Python and Ruby. We also have custom signatures that can be created in Ruby and JavaScript. And then, a few integrations there that you can tie those in with and cobble together a good auto remediation strategy. So I'll pass that back off to Anthony, or if you have any questions for me. But those are some of the resources we provide to achieve those.
Sure, and Hutch, I mentioned earlier that Ellie Mae is probably going to be looking at a multi-public cloud strategy in the future. Am I going to have to look for a new tool, or do you guys have a roadmap for that?
So that's an excellent question. Right now we're performing these checks on AWS, but there are a lot of different cloud options that are here and are coming. So we are adding Azure support very soon. So you'll be able to look at reports from not only AWS but Azure, and long-term Google is definitely something we're looking at. So we're looking to become in multi-cloud security solutions. So not locking ourselves into AWS, but providing these programmatic tools and integrations for a wide variety of those cloud solutions, whether it's AWS or Azure or possibly Google as well.
Yeah, and of course I knew the answer to that, but I didn't hear it mentioned. I thought it was very important because obviously when choosing the tool, you know your roadmap better than anybody else, and so being able to pick the tool that you can grow with, or a vendor that will grow with you, is obviously very important. So I think so that's kind of an evident insight. Let's see if we can get a slide moving forward here. So this is very dear to my heart, and it's mainly because I see a lot of teams, especially sort of the legacy centralized operations team, and I think this is the hardest pivot for anybody to make. And that's really changing the relationship that the team has with the other internal teams. Because if you're an operations team, while the legacy ones, you definitely would be the ones that would be in charge for deploying the load balancer or the Apache proxies or the app servers, and deploying, if you're doing Java, a war file to the Tomcat instances. And the goal is we're getting rid of that, and we're transforming to these centralized offerings where the way you interact with the operations team is through a CI/CD flow with declarative infrastructure. But it's important to realize that who the customer is and why you do things. So my goal when I came into this role a year ago was anytime somebody has to engage a member of my team directly, one of two things have happened. Either I've failed in documentation, or the individual has failed to read the documentation, which at that point, I should be redirecting them to the documentation. So it's really important that you, as a centralized team, you create that centralized landing page for your team, and it should be you have to think about if you visited Amazon.com or any one of these services, not the retail space, what does Amazon want to do? Well, they want to sell you something as quick as possible, so they're putting that in front of you as quick as possible. And even I don't expect you to get as fancy as doing machine learning in the background and saying, well, Bob from this team, he's been struggling with EC2, so I should present the EC2 information. It's not about that. It's about saying once Bob lands, how hard is it for Bob to get to the information he wants? So if I started showing them how Evident.io works behind the scenes and how my fancy orchestration pipeline works, they don't care. But what they do care about is that they need to launch application products, and they need to be unblocked. And so really creating that focal point and hiding your implementation details, your own support details, I think is very, very important. And so, and then of course, know what your value is to the company. Your value is to protect the company from developers who are in a state of learning, and it's also to provide that high level uptime, and it's also to do it as efficiently as possible. Making you win by making the developers go faster, the development teams go faster, without holding them back. And so for me it's very important. It should not be adversarial. It should be your allies. When you're partnering with security, you're partnering with the dev teams, and you're ultimately partnering with the entire business to make it faster. And then something that I think I did not focus on early, this is me kind of learning, is a really good training strategy. So we, as sort of a DevOps engineer or even an operations guy, we're kind of used to going to read documentation and figuring things out on ourselves, and realizing that not everybody can do that. Having a training strategy, whether it's classroom training or just because we understand, if we have the critical mass to be able to teach the classes ourselves, then teach the classes ourselves. And Ellie Mae is actually kicking off internally a kind of a reoccurring kind of class setting that we're going to work on, which is really teaching the the hundreds of engineers we have sort of these operational and DevOps principles, because we can hire a whole bunch of engineers, but we're in the Bay Area, so it's always a crunch trying to get the best people in for interviews. Not even counting being able to hire them. So us being able to have a training strategy is good for people's careers. It's good for people's morales, and it also gives us an opportunity to be able to be respected in the business. And when I say training strategy, I don't need to teach them how to do Java. They know how to do Java, but do they know the OSI model from layer 1 through 5? Do they understand DNS and IP networking? And so those things are really things that a traditional operations team is really, really good at. And we win by making everybody kind of be a full stack engineer, of course. So, and then last slide, and then this is really sort of thinking outside the box is, how do you choose what to do? Really, we operate as we're an internal team. We're not focused with our customers directly, but we do run sort of a internal product development type attitude. So we ourselves, we engage with our customers. We look for those pain points, and we try to, and the way we prioritize is really looking at where we're going to get the most bang for our buck, because it's really about efficiency versus cost savings versus security risk, and really triaging those together to prioritize what we work on. And so we're, right now we're doing things around, all of our teams have a similar need to run performance testing against all of their accounts. And, we can get them to normalize on a tool. Our tool is JMeter. And if we can get them to normalize on a tool, then we can normalize the way that we actually launch that tool, do test over test data that they can use to gauge it. And ultimately, if we integrate that into our CI/CD build, our CD build rather, then we potentially could stop deployments of a product that causes risk to the business. So really kind of thinking of an integrated, cohesive solution and how we can kind of meet all these concerns and least privilege and separate, all these separation of concerns that we can do throughout the entire thing. And of course, working in an agile Scrum, I imagine that everybody is using an agile Scrum sort of methodology, and we ourselves are not using the dry requirements document. We do a sort of a narrative-driven development where we do a press release, very similar to kind of the Amazon way of doing it. I don't know what that is because I've never worked at Amazon, but I'm pretty sure after talking to the people from there that we're pretty much aligned. But we create basically a press release, and it's a future state of what we want to be, and then we develop an FAQ against that, which is any question should be answered that can be asked. And these questions are usually not implementation details about technologies. They're more about how will I migrate from service A to this new offering, or will it do X or will it do Y? And quite simply, you write a narrative for each release, and if you say yes, it's in scope. If you say no, then it's for another day to solve. So it's a lot of fun things, a lot of changes, but ultimately, I think these centralized teams doing the automation, starting to maintain infrastructure that we own as code and trying to pull what should be pulled globally is important, and then letting the development teams just win and own what typically was responsibilities of the centralized team. I think we create companies that scale and are much more agile than the traditional ways. So with that, we we get to our Q&A session. Hopefully you've been entertained. So I will hand that off to somebody else to, I guess, triage that.
Yep. Alan's here, and I'll handle that. So first of all, guys, great job on this. I learned a lot listening to it, and we had some good questions from the audience. Let me answer the first question that we always get, which is, will the slides be available and will the recording be available? And the answer is yes and yes. These slides and the recording will be available within 24 hours up on our website and our DevOps TV YouTube channel. So I know there were maybe 2 or 3 people who had issues with slides. You'll be able to see them there. But let me jump in first with a couple of questions from Daniel. And Anthony, these are aimed at you. Are you doing security test out automation such as SAST on commit or DAST on deploy? And do you do this in all environments or just QA pre-production? So it's a
it's a fantastic question, and so Ellie Mae has ridiculous amounts of security controls that we have to meet, and for us it's a story that's evolving. So we're partnered with the security team, and so we're never done. But yes, today we're doing I would say we're doing traditionally security scans that would be expected, where we're running something like a Qualys against our networking environment, and but we're actually moving right now to start scanning essentially every environment. One of my gates for being able to move from an environment to environment is that you don't have any open security issues, and we do this a little bit with our we have a very thin layer Docker platform that we built on top of Amazon's ECS. This is using a security product called Aquasec that will scan Docker images for CVEs that are security exploits, and it'll also control the runtime. And so we do have that at every level of the gate. Of course, it's the same Docker container through every environment, but we have those quality gates, and we're looking at introducing pretty much security at every single layer and every single gate. Are we there yet? I think, like most companies, being real with yourself in the state is something very important. I would say that it's an evolving story, but the goal is essentially I think the ideal response is where we're pushing forward here in the next couple months. But we do have an amazing amount of security tools in the business, and trying to get them to fit cohesively is quite a challenge.
Okay, great. A follow-up to that is, what are you using Lambda for in relation to Evident.io? Remediation of config findings or something else?
Sure. So our usage of Lambda is specifically to remediate the accounts, and so we have a special AWS account that is our management account, which is the most dangerous account in the company, and we know it. And there's a reason that it's sort of air-gapped, and there's 3 people in the company that can access it, and and they're, of course, if they do something crazy with it, then something goes wrong. But basically, the Lambdas exist inside of that account, and they have the ability to assume a role into all the other AWS accounts we own, and perform operations in them. And so that's the Lambda code that gets executed, and of course, that itself has an entire CI/CD process built into it, because you can imagine the responsibility is immense. And if you end up making a change that affects everything, the great thing is you probably can also roll it back pretty quickly because you have control over it. But you can imagine the disruption to the business if a global change affected everything. But we're pretty much writing Python code with remediation using Boto 3, and the goal is once we get this to a more stable state, it's very similar to what Cloud Custodian does, but at the same time, I consider it to be a little bit more drier, and I think we'll try to open source this as well, because we're writing it in a very generic sort of way where remediate a role, remediate an IAM policy. So we'll see where the next few months takes us with getting the platform open source. But it's basically Evident notifies us as a problem, and we take action on it and go and remediate things. And We don't trust Evident.io with Evident.io actually supplies us variables. This is a very long-winded answer. Supplies us with variables, but I don't actually trust those variables that Evident.io gives me. So you have to realize it's least privilege and trust but verify. So Evident.io tells me there's a problem. I go fetch a config that I know is been sanitized before I go in and execute it. So this just protects me from Evident.io. If they had a sort of a problem on their side, I protect it. So, and this is just the way to do anything. You know, you sanitize your variables coming in for a database insert. You sanitize your variables coming in from a vendor as best you can.
Get it. Got it. Hutch, I wanted to ask you, beyond what Ellie Mae is doing using Lambda, any other Evident.io customers using Lambda in a different way maybe that you can tell us about, or is that really kind of it?
I mean, the good thing about Lambda, you know, is that it is incredibly flexible. So, you know, you can use it for something like auto remediation in the way that Ellie Mae is using it. But there are a lot of use cases outside of that you can use it for. So, you know, for example, you could pipe, you know, one of my favorite integrations that we have is SNS. You can you know, have Evident automatically send, you know, alerts to SNS, which can trigger something like Lambda, in which that case, you know, can perform auto remediation. I would say that's probably one of the most powerful and popular uses for it from Evident's perspective. But you can do other things like, okay, maybe keep a record of, you know, this categorization of alerts. So send all of the high-risk alerts, you know, from SNS, and you can configure that within ESP, and then pipe those to Lambda and perform some logic on that. It may not be auto remediation. It may be, okay, create a report of, you know, when this happened for our remediation, you know, documents. Maybe it's in a specific format or something like that, or to you know, send it to multiple avenues. So we do have, you know, several customers that are doing that, and you know, have had success with that. So that's just, you know, one example, but there are certainly a lot of different things that you can do with it. And again, that's just because it is so powerful.
Got it. All right, let's jump to another question. Are we using any VMware products in your DevOps lifecycle? So that would be it for you.
Sure. So Ellie Mae, our private cloud is entirely a sort of a VMware and even NetApp still. So we have, so our private cloud is entirely there. We're currently using Terraform. We've just pivoted over to Terraform for deploying into our private cloud using VMware and Terraform's scripts. And we've had a couple teams that were successful using, Amazon has a plugin for VMware to vMotion an existing pet. If you aren't familiar, we have pets and you know, basically livestock, and you know, the idea is that you don't want pets around because that creates very rigid infrastructure. But we've had a couple teams, they take over a pet into Amazon and using vMotion and a plugin from Amazon, and that's worked relatively well, but it doesn't work relatively well with a CI/CD flow, because then how do I transition that pet into production, especially if it's got configs that are burned into it that are you know, that are very hard-coded to a particular environment. So what we've been doing with teams is trying to get them to re-platform and them moving over, but definitely there's a lot of VMware, there's a lot of things, and it's you know, for us, I honestly, I don't have a lot of vision. I know that Terraform is there, and we've struggled with the orchestration of those components, just being able to get stability out of them. Not Terraform specifically, but the more the legacy code.
Okay, time for one more question. I'm going to throw this one over to Hutch. Hutch, do you know, if you're aware and if you can talk about it, are you aware of any government agency customers that are using Evident.io to help with FISMA compliance?
So I can't speak to specific, you know, customers or anything like that, but what I can say is, you know, we did a public announcement recently where we entered into an agreement with AIM-QTEL for funding. And they work with a lot of the government agencies, and they're interested in what we're doing as far as securing the cloud and the infrastructure. So we do especially cater to government as prospects and have resources there. So for example, there are some recent compliance views that we're working on that are looking at specific government applications or being having resources to become compliant and see where you're at in relation to compliance with things like FedRAMP. The other thing we have recently actually launched is ESP for GovCloud. So AWS has the GovCloud region, which of course caters to government agencies, but they also cater to businesses who have high compliance requirements as well. So commercial clients there that are based in the U.S. and need those stringent standards. So we do have solutions for companies and government agencies that have those requirements. So definitely something there that's relevant to them. We also at this point have compliance views for reports like NIST and ISO that would be relevant to those agencies or commercial clients as well if they need those.
Great. Hey guys, we're already a minute past the top of the hour, and we get kind of religious about doing these things on time. So we're going to call it a day right here. Anthony and Hutch, thanks for a really great deep dive here into Evident.io, deep dive into DevSecOps, cloud security, compliance. I know our audience loved it. Thanks very much. Maybe we'll do it again soon, and we'll make a part 2 of this. To everyone who stuck around here till the bitter end, thanks for listening, and I hope it was worthwhile. Thanks very much to Evident.io for sponsoring today's webinar. Until next time, this is Alan Schimmel, Editor-in-Chief of DevOps.com, and we'll see you again on another webinar soon. Bye-bye, everyone.